Welcome to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. I guarantee we have a super interesting guest and topic today. We have on here Cody. Brian, you work at Basys as the CMO. And we're going to be talking today about, as a CMO, what's our next best move, right? How do we create sustainable long-term growth? And what's interesting about your background is you came from a technical background, right? And so you carry through with that a real practicality in strategy and process and organizing the team, as well as kind of the both left brain, right brain, right? But as a CMO, we take on a role that is beyond our functional role in marketing. We are now an executive of the company. So you are a part of Basis in the long-term sustainable growth of the company. That's a part of the competency that you have to have. So this idea of what's our next best move has to incorporate all of that. But before we get started here, what I'd love to do is I'd love to turn it over to you for just a minute and explain a little bit more about your background and basis, and then we'll jump right in.
All right. Well, thanks, Steve. I really appreciate you having me on the podcast, and I'm excited to chat with you today. So yeah, a little bit about me. I like you mentioned, came at marketing from much more of a technical path, and in fact, my first really kind of key role, coming out of school, coming out of college, was I started as a business analyst, kind of writing technical requirements, and then really leverage some of my education and interest to become actually a developer at a company called Waddell & Reed, a financial services company, as I was really kind of coming up. And that really taught me the guts of really how systems work, how things really connect, and that technical kind of acumen of what I kind of call connecting the dots. When you're looking at a marketing system or a tool, you really need to understand how information is flowing from point A to point B, and how that enables your strategy. And so, I really took that technical part early on in my career, and it's served me ever since. But then really from that, started doing a lot of freelance work because I was really interested in how some of those digital marketing technologies really function. So started doing a lot of email marketing campaigns, building out different WordPress websites and other websites for small and medium-sized businesses in the Kansas City area. And that really allowed me to then transition over to more of a full-time marketing role, which led to eventually building out our first ever really digital marketing focused team at Waddell & Reed. And that kind of shifted me onto this leadership path where we got a lot of experience at how you mature a marketing organization through additional processes, additional tools that allow you to bolt on, say, a new analytics platform, a new social listening platform, a new streaming digital media platform. And that really gave me a sense for what are the different pieces that you need to build an effective marketing organization. And so from there, was able to move in, had a couple other roles, really leading some global teams at a digital level. And then most recently, here in 2024, was lucky enough to be able to join Basys and as the CMO, and I'm extremely excited about what we have going on here. Just a little bit about Basys. So we offer payment solutions for small, medium, and large businesses around in the United States, and that's primarily through a couple of channels. One is we have custom integrations with many software companies out there. If they need to accept payments, they come to us. We offer our world-class customer service, get integrated. So you can accept payments in your software. We also partner with various banks around the country so they can offer those credit card processing services and other payment services to their customers at the bank. So we create those close-knit partnerships. And we also work directly with merchants around the country to allow them to accept cards and do other type of payments to quickly enable their business to give their customers the choice they want. And we back that all with, like I mentioned before, a real core focus on customer service, which really sets us apart from many people in the industry.
That might be one of the next best moves, right? Is this focus on customer service. There's actually a study that was done that I call a landmark study by McKinsey and Company, and it was just over a year ago, and they studied 400 different companies, B2B and B2C companies, and that had long-term sustainable profitable growth and greatest return on shareholder value. And they found that the number one differentiator is customer experience. So that service that you're talking about, that elevates to the level of product, right? That elevates to the level of the very technology that we're providing, right? Because the service component, which is one of the biggest leading indicators of customer experience, is one of the biggest differentiators we have. So I'm glad you brought that up. Kind of went on a side tangent there, but here's
Yeah,
how I want
no,
to
and
start us
so
off.
on that, I just to kind of dive in with, some of that customer experience as a differentiator. That's a big reason why I joined Basys as a marketer, as someone who's really wanted to lead in that area. It was important to me to come to a company that actually had true differentiators, and when you see how Basys really does that in a world of AI, web pages, where you're supposed to kind of self-service everything. People still want to have that personal touch, and they wake up with a ton of things on their plate, and if we can help take a few things off, make their lives easier, then that really does become a very valuable part of their relationship with Basis. So yeah, I agree with your point there.
Yeah, we you think about how much time we spend thinking about our technology, our product that we go to market with, and in planning and the roadmap and everything. We really need to be thinking that much about the experience that we're creating. The product is a part of that experience, but it is a important part, but it's only a part of it. So I love that we've kind of talked about this at the start of the conversation here. But I want to redirect us to, you know, how do we create sustainable growth with limited resources? No matter who you talk to. I've talked to some of the biggest brands in the world. I remember years ago, I've talked to, Coca-Cola, and they were like, we had such limited funds. And I'm like, you're Coca-Cola. They're like, we only got like a nickel under the cap, right? For marketing. Nobody thinks they have unlimited resources, right? So how do we create sustainable growth in that kind of an environment?
Sure, and whether you're Coca-Cola or you're, a startup that just started yesterday, everybody is beholden to that triangle of, what's it going to cost, or how much money do I have, right? How much time do I have, and how much do I need to do, and then what's the acceptable level of quality, right? So we're all beholden to that. So I'm always thinking about, for our team and for our company at Basis, how do we make sure we're allocating the right parts, the right pieces, and to me, it really comes down to prioritization. Um, and and everybody kind of thinks that way, right? You've got to prioritize, but the real key is then you have to make, as an organization, as a marketing organization, and as an organization as whole, you have to really make an investment in process around like how you manage your projects. And so at Basis, and really, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is ensuring that we have an answer when someone says, can you do this, and how long this will take. And so we've really taken a step to invest heavily in a marketing, what we call traffic coordinator, or someone that's really focused on our process and our project management for every single task. And we leverage Asana front to back. So every request comes in through a specific form with specific information that allows us to kind of look at things on a one-to-one basis, and not be kind of having guesswork and things flying through chat and through email. And then we're able to take that and couple that with this concept of having more of a quarterly and even kind of year-long plan. So we're kind of looking around the curve, so that we can really kind of prove, what's on tap for the next 2 weeks, the next 2 months, and even the next 2 quarters, so that you can kind of quickly see, well, how does this request, how does this initiative kind of tie in with the broader strategy? And that's not unlike, that kind of technical side. I mean, I'm Scrum certified a few times as a product owner, and as an individual consumer, right? That's not dissimilar to how, larger organizations, or even kind of these technology companies really focus when they're building technologies and products. So that's kind of the mindset we have, is kind of that agile for marketing mindset.
I love that because it's very easy for the tail to wag the dog as a marketer, right? We get so many requests that, and we're like everybody else, right? We don't have unlimited amount of time and resources. And so all of a sudden we can become less and less strategic and more project focused, right? So the idea that you're organizing, you're looking around the corner and you're prioritizing that. How do you share priorities with the other departments that you're serving, right? Because there's there's going to be more requests than you have time to do. So they're going to have to agree with your priorities, right? How do you come into that agreement?
Yeah. And I just to kind of reiterate what you were talking about, Steve, right? As a marketing organization, one of the big things I'm always, discussing with the organization and the team is we need to move from being reactive to proactive. And so how do we do that? That's kind of a core guiding kind of North Star for us every day is how are we moving more toward proactive or are we moving more toward reactive? Because we want to be in that proactive space so we can help enable the business and the success there. But in terms of how we do that, how do we really create a marketing strategy? The first thing is, I mean, we just need to, you hear about listening tours. We really just need to take it all in, really understand what are the goals of the business at the leadership level, the different areas from sales, from the other areas of the business, from product. What are we hearing are the goals there? So that you can at the very least see kind of 100% of what everyone is wanting to have. And then making sure that once we have that, it's I've seen things done one of two ways. One is kind of pick what you want to do, go with maybe the what makes sense politically, or what you feel like you can do. Or I've seen it just where you really gotta. To me, I take a lot of comfort in forcing those tough conversations about, hey, this is the complete plan. This is that we're going to fall back on our structure for how we measure how many hours we can spend through that kind of agile scrum like process, and then we're going to be able to have those conversations, to be able to have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from a priority standpoint. So to me it is about taking it all in, without any bias, and then really going through and using that project management focus from a marketing standpoint, similar to how other agile technology companies work, and then forcing those tough conversations and those to get that prioritization.
So those tough conversations, I want to break that down a little bit because that's where we drop the ball a lot, right? It's much easier just to take on more than it is to say no. But this is where alignment comes in, right? If you're aligned on the same plan, in our previous conversation, you focus a lot on the word alignment, right? Because if we're all aligned, then there is a common priority, right? That we can all say, hey, is that a part of where we're all headed, right? Is that a part of the plan? There's a marketing plan, but there's, like you said, understanding the goals of the organization. There's a plan that every department has a contributing role to, and so is that a part of those prior? How does alignment play in those tough conversations? I guess is my question.
Sure, and yeah, so to be able to facilitate those, I always think about, in terms of how do we get that alignment from the start. A big thing that a method that I'm a big fan of that I almost always fall back to when we're solving a problem is what's called the 5W1H method. So what that really stands for, it's an acronym that stands for what, who, where, when, why, and how. So it's like, how are we going to do this? Why are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? I'm always, let's break it down and look through that. And I'll give you an example. So at Basys we serve multiple channels, right? We are working to work with more software companies to integrate our payment solutions with them. We are working to partner with more banks to enable some of their merchant services, so and payment abilities with their customers, to be a partner there. And then we're also obviously through partnerships and directly bringing more merchants into our portfolio. So we have multiple channels, multiple streams for marketing to serve beyond, of course, our existing customers. But so how I would break it down using that 5W1H method is, from a marketing standpoint, for each one of those sales channels, I would say, why are we doing this? So what are our goals here? What are we trying to accomplish? Right. So that's kind of that why. Who are we targeting? Making sure we really get crystal clear about our audience, where are we going to use our first party data versus, matching and other ways to really target that audience. What content's going to resonate? So what are those? What type of content mix? What's our strategy? What's going to really make them take action? Where will we spend our marketing dollars? So what's the marketing channels that we're going to focus on? How much do we have to spend? When will we execute? What's that calendar of events? Those campaign durations. So what's that? What does that timing look like? And then finally, how are we going to measure success? What reporting are we going to do? What insights do we have? How are we going to optimize and move forward? So if you're able to break it down at that level for each one of those key stakeholders across the company and pull that together, that's really going to enable some of those tough conversations so they can see. Then you start to see like the size of how and the effort behind some of these different areas and the potential returns on that, so you can facilitate some of that prioritization.
You know, I love the breaking it down, because when you break it down, it forces you to think through at a greater level than just kind of going with your gut, right? Been doing this a long time. I know the playbook. Here's what we're going to do. And one of the whys, right? The where, when, why. Part of the why is understanding not only the organizational goals and what's good for us, but understanding our customers, our clients, right? Our ICP, our deal customer profile, right? The why is always, they're the highest voice of authority in any business, right? So the why has to incorporate and include them. And what I've found and heard time and time and time again, we've been interviewed over 150 C-suite executives on this podcast. And one of the consistent threads is, if they understand the needs of their customers, they understand their priorities, right? It's the directional beacon, it's the North Star. And it's one of those differentiators, right? When you get all those projects lobbed at you, is it a top priority to the company and the customer, right? And if we own the voice of the customer, then we have a very large voice in setting those priorities. I just wanted to understand a little bit on that why and what you think about that.
Yeah. And Steve, I couldn't agree more that it has to be informed by that voice of the customer. And, some of the tools we use at Basys, really as an organization, I know different people have different opinions about, using an NPS score, that net promoter score.
Right.
But for us at Basys, it is something we invest a lot of time and energy in every week, not only with customers physically accepting and using those card terminals and those technologies, but also with our partners. We are laser focused on ensuring that we have some of the best NPS scores, in the industry, if not just kind of globally among companies, across, in America. So that part to us is a real real focal point. So we gauge, how we're doing, and then we also take those comments and that feedback and really make sure that we're acting on it, and that if we do have a problem arise, that we're being really proactive with that specific customer to solve their problem, making sure that that they feel heard. So we do that as one mechanism. We also really focus on having kind of core user groups for our products to make sure we get that direct product feedback. And then from a marketing standpoint, when I first came into the organization, I was able to go on a couple of visits to make sure I'm in the bank lobby. I'm at the different small business, learning about what their needs are, what their questions are, what their objections are. So at a marketing level, I really felt like it was important to get out there and understand the nuances of our customers, what their needs are. And that's something that we do as a marketing organization, making sure that we're getting that direct connectivity, because it can be very easy to be, two steps removed and just trying to put a pretty design on something, but not really understanding what the core problem is that it solves when you're communicating about Basys or about our products.
That tie to the customer. We had a woman on, Everett Ravi. She's a 3-time B2B CMO. She's also a chief value accelerator advisor for Goldman Sachs. And the way she put it on the show, she was like, there's nothing more important that we do than staying tied and connected to that customer, right? Because when we take our eye off of that is the moment that we fall behind, right? Because our ICP is complex and always changing. Right? The minute we think we understand our customers, we fall into the trap of familiarity with them, but not really a true understanding and meeting their needs. So I love that focus on the NPS score and using that as a kind of a North Star. You know, I want to talk a little bit more about um, the idea of building consensus because there's a lot of different players. And, we've done, I think, 8 different podcasts on why do B2B CMOs fail so quickly. And the two things that come up is alignment and collaboration, right? And that requires a consensus on where we're going and what we're doing. Here's a stat, and you're going to love this. As an industry in B2B, there is only 16% alignment between marketing and sales on just the definition of our ICP. Just the definition of our ICP. That lack of alignment then means there's no consensus, right? So, how do you think about alignment and building consensus?
Sure. Yeah. And the first thing I think about is at the, especially at a leadership level is about understanding, where is and getting alignment at the very beginning around like where does marketing play from a revenue standpoint? Are we going to be purely seen as a cost center, or are we going to really be part of the revenue story, right? That as a marketing leader, I want to build that rapport with sales, and I want it to be well known and accepted that we are part of we are driving the bottom line here. And so when you invest in having a strong project management and a strong process to your organization, you can start to take steps like making sure that everything that goes out the door, for our team is tagged in our CRM. So any engagement, any touch point where we know who we're targeting, we're tagging them with that specific that specific campaign or touch point, doing that on top of all of the standard tagging, linking, and all that, but really kind of tying it back. So what we're doing is as we build with marketing, we're kind of being able to look back over and in B2B, you have really extended long-term sales cycles. They're really complex, but as new customers come in, new partners, we're really focusing on measuring and really creating what we call marketing impact report. So, you think about any new partnership, um, any new customer, and a lot of times it's unlike B2C, right? They didn't just see that email maybe and buy
Right.
that thing. This is a multi-point. So we want to be able to understand of any revenue coming in the door, what was their level of engagement with marketing, so we can kind of then define and correlate the impact of the marketing engagements with that new customer, that new partner. And so, yeah, that's really kind of what we're thinking about is where do we have some more of that direct correlation? Where do we have, how many touch points? So we're really kind of looking at how do we break that down and report really monthly on what we call, like I said, that marketing impact report of the new money or revenue or customers that are coming in, what percentage of them were hit by marketing, to what degree, and then of course, looking at then the success of those tactics and those campaigns to see where we want to invest and optimize and move forward. So that's a starting point for us on that. And then in terms of that alignment piece, to kind of take that a step farther, I view it always as, if you create a plan, that's great, but you got to keep the train on the tracks. And so
Good.
for us, we really have really a reoccurring biweekly touch point, really focused on sales and marketing coordination. And our marketing team, we really focus on investing a lot into that meeting every couple of weeks, so that there's no excuse to not knowing what's going on. So we're looking at 30 days of what work is coming in, 30 days out of what marketing deliverables are being put out and being executed, and then looking at that monthly cadence of measurement across campaigns and different channels. And then the last piece is really having an open dialogue into, what's the feedback in the room from our different sales leaders, what's working, what isn't, what are some shift in priorities. So we really use that as a way to constantly um, realign and reassess what we're doing and how we're doing it. But everyone really walks out of that room. I say at the beginning, like, okay, the goal of this meeting is to make sure that there aren't any questions about what we're doing and why we're doing when you walk out that door. And if you have those questions, then I'm always here to make sure that we get there.
That's cool. Like that provides not only the context, the consensus, but everybody has an opportunity then to comment. Their fingerprints get on it, right? If we all have a common plan, then we want to execute that plan. We want to make sure that everybody has input on that, right? The last thing people want is to say, here's the plan, here's what we're doing. So now you're informed, right? You know, consensus doesn't work that way. Collaboration doesn't work that way. At the very beginning, and we talked, and it's the topic, right? As a CMO, what's our next best move? If I would just very simply ask you that question, what's our next best move? What would you say?
Yeah. To me, I look at in terms of what's our next best move. I look at there's things that are constantly changing, right? You look at like the yearly Martech reports that come out, Martech.org, right? They just talk about went from 12,000 to 20,000 to 200,000 different marketing technologies and tools, right? And so, to me, it's kind of two things I think about every day is how are we staying educated and aware of that shifting landscape of what tools and technologies are out there. Obviously, we talk about AI, AR, all the and all the different, shifting kind of preferences on social media, right? What's going to happen with TikTok may or may not happen, right? You need to be aware of those, so you know what tactics are available to you. So part one, in terms of knowing what's our next best play, is to stay educated on the landscape and doing that, making sure that's a real part of your week to week. But then I always fall back on the B2B side. I really look at, some of those core principles that have been around for a long time. They've been studied. And so you're really focused on how do I take that ever shifting landscape? Where do I make a decision to apply one of those new tools to these core principles for B2B growth? And, when I think about B2B growth, I think about five things, right? It's making sure that you're investing in your share of voice. So making sure that your share of voice is above your market share to help kind of grow that market share. A topic we can kind of dig into a little bit is kind of this balance between brand, brand building and that kind of long-term play of kind of that mental availability and awareness versus sales activation, right? One is a quick spike. The other is a long-term investment. The third thing is about where do you want to kind of really put your dollars from a more of a mass reach media? Where do you really feel like you can get your best bang for your buck when you do want to do some of that brand building? That fourth thing being, well, how does that maximize your mental availability to the right customer base, the right partnerships, to attract the right partnerships? And then from a creative standpoint, more and more with B2B, it's not kind of as buttoned up as it used to be, right? There's a lot of studies out there that really show that that B2B customers, they're still people at heart, right? And so some of that, seeing that power of emotion and really kind of breaking outside being memorable, where can you really apply that in the B2B space? I'm a big believer that they're getting they're getting B2C stuff all the time, and that's resonating. So there's a place for that in the B2B space as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially like in the financial fintech payments industry. It'd be very easy to be very straightforward and very, very direct and very, take that kind of an approach. But in the end, there was a great study that came out that showed that B2B expectations, like you mentioned, service upfront, are on par with B2C. So, like, when we can order on Amazon Prime and get that item, if we order in the morning, sometimes we can get it later that afternoon, right? That level of service, it's not like we just, we compartmentalize it and say, that's just for that part of my life. But no, this level of service and this experience that you talked about earlier and everything, so important. So I want to ask the opportunity here because we've covered a lot of ground, but if there was one takeaway that you wanted people to have about the next best move for a CMO, what would you want us to take away from our conversation here?
Yeah, I think for me, because I've seen it happen so many times, and it's really informed, the way I like to go about things is, probably the biggest takeaway from my standpoint is that, moving fast is great, but don't move forward unless you really have confirmation that everyone is aligned to doing what you said you're going to do. I've seen it, because yeah, everybody's really tempted to move forward and create and get things done and get things moving. But I've seen it, I'd rather take a half step forward than one step forward and two steps back. I've seen it time and time again where there's isn't that connectivity and that's bumping up against, hey, I've got to do something, I've got to succeed, I've got to show my worth. Um, and it's kind of come back to bite, different marketing organizations that I've been a part of. So, that's a real focus for me is making sure that we're kind of going back to that reoccurring meeting. We're all looking at the same sheet of paper and we're all looking at the same plan together. And we're getting kind of those nods directly and those objections, which are great. We're having those hard conversations, before we really make investments in terms of where we're going with our sales and marketing dollars.
It makes sense. It's you don't want to do that, run forward with the decision and beg for forgiveness later. Right?
Yeah.
So, I know there's going to be questions that people have. Would it be appropriate if we provided a link to your LinkedIn profile so that people could reach out and get a hold of you?
Sure. Be all for that. I'm always open to network and learn from others and to see what questions people have.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your next best move insights. And I'll tell you one of my big takeaways here is that alignment and collaboration, right? Or that consensus, because we're all smart people. We didn't make it to where we are. If we didn't have a brain, we didn't have our own idea exactly what we should be doing, right? But if we're checking in with our customers and we're building that consensus and alignment internally, things are just going to go a lot better. That was my big takeaway from our call. So thank you. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
And thank you, Steve. I really appreciate the opportunity.